After you put your legs over enough bikes, you start to anticipate how they're going to feel before you even ride them. That is, until a bike comes along that totally blows away all your expectations. And that's exactly what this bike did for me today. Here's my review on the 2018 Santa Cruz Hightower LT. Hey guys, Josh here with Daily Mountain Bike Rider, and today is all about my review of the 2018 Santa Cruz Hightower LT. I've done a bunch of different Long Travel 29er reviews over the last couple of months, and you guys have consistently begged me to go and give this bike a try. So I went over to my local bike shop, Fanatic Bike Company, and they are an awesome bike shop because they have every demo I could ever dream of to try, from Evil, Da Vinci, Norco, and even Santa Cruz. So I headed over there and I got set up by one of their mechanics, and they helped me get this bike suspension dialed before I even touched dirt, which is awesome. Now, before I tell you about how the bike rode, let me talk to you about the spec of this bike that I got. They set me up with the Hightower LT, and this is the CC-X01 build. Working my way up from the bottom, this bike comes with E13 TRS Plus rims, and those are connected to DT Swiss hubs. And on those wheels, both front and rear are a Maxxis DHR2, which I found odd they use the DHR2 on the front and rear. And these are just a 29 by 2.4. Looking at the drivetrain, it is a SRAM, and this is an X01 Eagle build. And for the crank, you have a carbon SRAM Eagle crank that worked very well. Looking up from there at the suspension, you've got Fox suspension on the front and the rear. For the fork, you've got the 36 Performance Elite fork. And this is not the RC2 where you can dial the high and low speed compression. It just got the 3-position lever. And on the rear, you've got the new Fox DPX2 and the Performance Elite, which has been a great rear shock and I've enjoyed on all the demos I've had. Brakes are also SRAM, and those are just the Guide RSCs. Looking up at the cockpit, you've got a Santa Cruz carbon bar. It's got a race face effect stem. And on that, you also have the 1x dropper post that goes to the RockShox reverb dropper. And last but certainly not least, you've got the WTB Silverado saddle. So I jumped on this bike, went to my trails, and started making my way up the mountains. And I decided to go off course a little bit and try out just some typical cross-country climbing trails. And I wanted to share with you my on-trail views of how this bike rode going uphill.
Alright guys, so like I said, I'm out on the trails, and this is just my first impression on the Santa Cruz Hightower CC-X01 build. So far I really like the bike. The climbing position's really nice. Feels very planted, while also feeling kind of light and nimbly, which is just a dream. This bike feels like it's just a really good all-day bike so far. But the real question is, how is it gonna go downhill? So I'll check up in with you guys after I make it to the top.
So as you can see, I was initially very impressed by the bike. I've ridden a lot of Long Travel 29ers recently, and this bike definitely stood above the rest as being one of the best climbers out there. Now, climbing is great and all, but what we all really care about is the downhills. Now, I had my gimbal, and I was gonna bring you guys on the ride so I could show you some footage, until I had just a few camera problems.
Hey guys, so I'm up here at the top. I got the Hightower all dialed in, but unfortunately my gimbal is just being wonky as ever. Every time I take a sharp turn to the side, the whole thing flips over and rotates. So all that to say, I'm gonna get some stationary shots with my phone. So sorry I can't have a point of view. I did the best I can, but anyway, gonna go check this thing out on the downs, and I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
So I made my way down the mountains, and I have some shots that I'll show you in just a minute of the riding. But man, off the bat, I was so impressed with this bike. I have ridden the Santa Cruz before. I rode a Bronson about 2 or 3 years ago. It was a little too small for me and I didn't have a great time, and I wasn't sure how I felt about the VPP rear suspension. But after riding this, I am reconsidering everything I thought about the company. So let's talk about the Hightower. There are 3 big pros that stood out to me about this bike. The first is their VPP rear suspension. I've ridden a bunch of single pivot designs, I've ridden the Delta Link from Evil, and I was very, very impressed at how well the rear shock worked. I felt like it was very stable on the top of the stroke, so I could mash into the pedals and gain speed in the middle of the trail, and I didn't feel like the rear suspension wallowed. But then as soon as I landed a big hit or railed into a turn, that's when that plushness just came in full bore. Second thing I was really impressed by this bike was the amount of travel on it. I have the Evil Reckoning. It's got 160 millimeters of travel front and rear. I've also tried the Sentinel, which is 160 up front and 140 out back. And I've always thought in my head, 150 millimeters of travel seems to be the best bang for your buck. And Santa Cruz showed me that I think I was right in that thought. I felt like you had enough travel that you were using it on just your everyday enduro trails, but then again, it wasn't too much travel where you feel like it was just too much to lug around, so the bike did great on that. And the third thing was, I was totally blown away by the climbing on this bike. When you think long travel 29er, you don't think climbing like a goat and having a lot of fun getting up the trail, but this thing blew me away with how well it got up there. Now, with every pro to a bike, there's also some cons. And there's two big cons that stood out to me. One of them was, while I really did like the rear suspension design, I did feel that the mid-stroke was really missing in this bike. Felt really stable at the top of the stroke and felt the plushness at the bottom, but as soon as I pushed into the rear suspension, it just blew through everything. Now, for me, that wasn't too big of a deal because it kind of suits my riding style. I like to just mash when I can and then blow through it and get right to the progressiveness as my shock, but some people will see that as a big negative to the bike. And the second big negative, and this one's very big for me, and I know I have an Evil Reckoning, so I can't be that cheap, but this bike is $6,800 for this spec that I rode. And while it does come with a really nice carbon frame, carbon cranks, and a carbon bar, I feel like Santa Cruz missed the mark in a couple of areas. First would be to get some carbon hoops for that price. Second would be just to put a DHF on the front, but that's personal preference. And I'm not a big fan of SRAM brakes, but I'm not complaining about that. But another thing is the fork. The Fox 36 Performance Elite's a great fork, and you can get it in the RC2 version, and that would allow for a little more adjustability. And I feel like this bike, with the amount of money you're spending, should really have that on it. So just a couple of negatives that I found, but my overall review that I would love for you guys to know is I was stinking impressed with this bike. I was not expecting to love it. I wasn't expecting to come away with it even being in my top 10 bikes, but I'm not gonna lie, this definitely is up there in my top 3 bikes I've ever ridden. This includes a downhill bike and more cross-country oriented bike. I think this bike is phenomenal, and Santa Cruz did something well because it's good wherever you're gonna be riding. Whether you do more flowy trails, technical trails, cross-country, and pedaling all day, I really think this bike is, forgive me, a quiver killer in a lot of ways. And I don't think I made the wrong decision in getting my Evil Reckoning because it definitely suits the riding style that I do. But if I went back in time and demoed this Hightower LT before, I'd definitely be splitting hairs to figure out which bike I would buy. At the end of the day though, that's just my opinion from one day on the bike, and it's up to you to decide if this is the best bike for your riding style. So my encouragement, don't just listen to me and other guys on YouTube. Go out there and try it yourself and see if the Santa Cruz Hightower LT is the perfect bike for you. All right, that's it for me, Josh. If you liked the video, do me a favor and click that like button below. It helps me out a ton. And don't be afraid to click the subscribe button. Helps me and lets me know you guys are there, and it keeps you up to date on all the videos I have. All right, it's the end of my video. You know what time it is. Don't watch too many bike reviews and guys sitting in their garage talking about bikes. Get out there and ride your bike. And while you do that, try to remember to ride it every single day so that you can get better every day.